So joining me now is my friend and good friend of all freedom fighters, Tracey Wilson from the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. Tracey, thanks for coming on the show. I wanted to have you on because, as is always the case, when the Liberals see their polling results and they suck, they launch an attack on their easy scapegoats, and that's firearms owners in this country. Why? Because they're the most law-abiding people in this country. So it's easier to deal with them than it is to deal with crime. Tell us about the latest gun grab, because it really was the last death rattle of a dying government.
Yeah, you're right. As usual, break glass, ban guns, target the people who are most unlikely to vote for them. And that, of course, is legal licensed gun owners. So last week, the federal Liberal government banned another 179 models of firearms, models and variants. Now, to be honest, about 150 of those on the list are the M1. So, I know they like to really puff up the numbers, but yeah, this was a really strange list. It creates a lot of confusion. I was in the technical briefing with the minister's staff on Monday. And of course, there's an amnesty that protects gun owners. Now, we've had 3 different gun bans. We had the big one in May of 2020. We had 324 firearms, I think, added to that one back in December of 2024. And then this one on March 7th. So now there's 2 different amnesties. Those first 2 gun bans are protected by an amnesty until the end of October of this year, 2025. But these new firearms that were just banned on March 7th are protected by an amnesty until March 1st, 2026. So, just to keep things totally simple for gun owners, now you've got to check which list your banned guns are on to know how long the amnesty protects you. And at the end of the day, I think you and I both know they're never actually going to get this stuff done. So yeah, just more political posturing at the expense of public safety. The day after their announcement, we had a mass shooting in Scarborough where 12 people were injured. Thankfully, nobody died. But yeah, just another result of Liberal public safety policy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're not ever addressed. Like, these are expensive, sweeping gun bans if they ever get around to taking them from Canadian firearms owners. And you can tell by the timeline, they don't ever think they're going to have to, because I think they know they're not getting reelected. It's just how bad the blowout is going to be for the Liberals. But they never actually do anything to deal with the crime, to deal with the border, to deal with the gangs and the fentanyl and the drug trafficking and the sex trafficking. They never actually deal with that stuff. They just take the path of least resistance and think that this is going to appease the urban voters that they want to remain within the Liberal fold in places like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver.
Well, I'd even go a step further and say not only do they not do anything to solve the real crisis in public safety, in fact, they use it. And I know if I would have said that a couple of years ago, people would have said I was a conspiracy theorist. But it's bearing out for everyone to see. You look back to the Nova Scotia shooting, right? A crime committed by a madman with illegal smuggled guns. And that was what they used to catapult into these gun bans. It's got nothing to do with licensed gun owners, hunters, sport shooters, ranchers. It's got nothing to do with us, but they use that violence. So when people say to me, why do you think they're not actually tackling the tough issues to stop the smuggled guns coming into the country and fueling gangs? And unfortunately, I have to say, I think they're using it. They use it to support their crazy policies. And, law enforcement agrees with me. They agree that the Liberals have not done enough. And in fact, they've damaged public safety with bills like C5 and C75 that lowered the sentences for some violent repeat offenders committing some really serious crimes with guns. So yeah, it's crazy town here in Ottawa.
Now, Ottawa is crazy, but it is more sane out here in the West, particularly in Alberta and Saskatchewan, who had their own responses to Justin Trudeau's escalating gun bans. It started at the very beginning when they said, actually, we're going to appoint our own chief firearms officers, people who actually know something about the firearms owning culture out here. And then both provinces have said, we're not going to direct our RCMP resources in the middle of a public safety crime crisis to go door to door to round up guns on behalf of Justin Trudeau. And I mean, really, that's what they would have to do, is just get the list of PAL and RPAL holders and then go door to door, because many of these firearms have never been registered because they're moving from non-restricted over to prohibited. And so the only way to deal with that is literally knocking doors. And I think, and our premier thinks, and the premier of Saskatchewan also think, that the cops just have far better things to do.
Well, it's really interesting because Alberta and Saskatchewan, they have a whole different level of understanding of freedom. Mm-hmm. And, you know, God bless the West. But they've put in some measures that actually make it very difficult for confiscators to come there and do that work. In fact, Saskatchewan has a roadblock built into their legislation that, and I believe Alberta has it as well, where you need to get a confiscator license from the province before you start going and collecting guns. And of course, I think we all know how many of those will be issued. 0. And you're right about them not knowing who's got what. I mean, aside from our AR-15s, which were previously registered and restricted, everything else is non-restricted for the most part. So they have no idea who's got what. And I think I had some stuff leaked to me that what they're going to do is the Canadian Firearms Program is going to send an email to, or a letter to, licensed gun owners, all 2.4 million of us, and ask us to voluntarily submit lists of what we own that is now banned. That it's going to be reliant on self-reporting. And the idea here will be, if you don't give us that list, you get no compensation for those guns. And, you know, we'll send armed cops to your door anyways to come and take your stuff. So yeah, I can't believe this is where we're at. I know Rod made a video a few years back talking about what a gun call looks like. And when you are sending police to a home with guns, it's an ERT response. They don't knock on the door and, hey, I'm your friendly sergeant, just coming to see if you've got any guns that were banned. It's not going to be like that. And we were ridiculed for that video. And here we are a couple of years later, and it looks like that's exactly what they're going to do. So yeah, I don't know. It's scary times for gun owners in this country, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think the Liberals have actually thought any of this through, because they keep talking about weapons of war, but they didn't actually ban the one weapon of war that they've been musing about for a long time, and that's the World War II Soviet era SKS.
Yeah, right.
And I think they said, oh, we're not banning it because Indigenous people use it for sustenance hunting, or whatever their dumb excuse was, because a lot of people use it for sustenance hunting.
Yeah.
I think they just have no clue how many of these things there are. And because they're a gun show gun. They're a lot of people's first firearms purchase because they're cheap to buy, they're cheap to shoot, and they are reliable. That's why they've been around for the better part of 100 years. So, they had this nonsensical excuse to cover up the fact that, like, we don't know what to do. We have no idea what to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, we used to buy SKSs by the crate. We'd get a crate of 12. Sure. They were the type of gun that was so cheap to use and so cheap to shoot that you'd buy a crate and you'd hand them out at Christmas as gifts. Like, it was just, it's like buying a case of slippers. But my prediction is the reason why they mentioned the SKS in the press conference, yet failed to ban it, much to the chagrin of the anti-gun lobbies, is because we're right pre-election time here, right? And that is going to cause a massive uproar among Canadian Indigenous peoples. So I think what they'll do is they'll wait until after the election. They think they're going to win. We'll see what happens, I guess. But if they do win, they will absolutely come for it next. They just don't want to do that pre-election and, stir up problems with their path to reconciliation.
Right. I mean, and also it just balloons the cost of the gun grab. I think, what do they have it now? The government has it pegged at what, $2 billion. You can double that easily if you throw the SKS in there, and they've already spent like some nearly $70 million and they haven't taken a single firearm.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
God.
interesting actually. If you watch that press conference, Rachel Bendayan, Liberal MP and Associate Minister of Public Safety, she, touted it as a great success, stage one, where they're taking firearms from retailers, like brand new ones that have never been sold, that are sitting in their inventory for the last 5 years, picking those up and destroying them. And she says, oh, it's more successful than we ever imagined. And I think they've destroyed 7,300 firearms. And I couldn't help but literally laugh out loud watching it, because we're talking over 500,000 guns across the country. And she's celebrating 7,300 that come from willing participants who are little ma and pa shops across the country who've been stuck with this inventory that's already paid for 5 years, paying insurance and storage. I hate the fact that anyone participates in this, but I do look at it completely different for retailers. And here, it's like a drop in the bucket, like a needle in a haystack. And she's celebrating like it's some huge success. Wait until you've got to deal with individuals where you're talking about these firearms I've owned for decades, if not generations, safely and without issue. And now you expect me to come turn them in? Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time in Canada for sure.